Dear listener, welcome once more to the Miss Marple mystery, where the little grey cells unravel the most perplexing enigmas of the human soul. Tonight we invite you to immerse yourself in a tale of shadowed secrets and crimson betrayal. The Silent Village Killer, Miss Marple's darkest suspicion. As you settle into rest, let the soft rhythm of the words carry you away from the cares of the day. Each story is a companion for the night, guiding you gently toward peace, calm, and sleep. Now close your eyes, breathe deeply, and allow yourself to drift into this world of cozy mystery and quiet delight. Chapter 1. Whispers in the Willows. The village of St. Mary Mead, nestled in a gentle hollow of the English countryside, where ancient willows swayed like gossipy matrons, their branches whispering secrets to the crisp autumn breeze. It was October 1935, a time when the world teetered between the fading elegance of the Edwardian era and the restless hum of modernity. The cobbled lanes, carpeted with golden leaves, wound past thatched cottages whose rose gardens exhaled a fading perfume. The church spire, piercing a sky of bruised clouds, stood as a silent guardian over a community that prided itself on its tranquility. Yet beneath this idyllic surface, like a current beneath a placid stream, stirred the timeless frailties of human nature, envy, greed, and the quiet malice that festers in close-knit places. Miss Jane Marple, that unassuming spinster of St. Mary Mead, sat in her rose-scented parlor, her knitting needles clicking a rhythmic counterpoint to the ticking of the mantel clock. Her fluffy white hair framed a face lined with gentle wisdom, and her bright blue eyes, sharp as a hawk's, missed nothing that passed her lace-curtained window. At 70-something, she was a figure of deceptive fragility, her lace-trimmed cardigan and sensible shoes belying a mind that unraveled human puzzles with the precision of her knitting. "Dolly, my dear," she called softly, her voice a melody of quiet authority. "Have you heard the news from the vicarage? It's quite unsettling." Mrs. Dolly Bantry, a robust woman with a penchant for dramatic gestures, bustled in from the kitchen, her cheeks flushed from the warmth of baking scones. She set a tray on the table with a clatter, her hazel eyes wide with excitement. "Jane, it's simply dreadful. Old Mrs. Clement, the vicar's mother, passed away last night, sudden as a snapped thread. Dr. Haydock says it was heart failure, but she was striding about the village green just yesterday, lecturing the new curate on his sermons. Heart failure indeed." Dolly's tone was a mix of indignation and relish, her personality thriving on the thrill of village gossip. Miss Marple's needles paused, her expression thoughtful as she sipped her tea. "Heart failure, you say? How very convenient. It puts me in mind of that affair in Chipping Cleghorn, where appearances were so misleading. One must always look beneath the surface, Dolly." Her words, mild as a summer breeze, carried a weight that set Dolly's mind racing. Miss Marple's knack for seeing parallels in human behavior, patterns as predictable as her knitting stitches, made her the village's unofficial oracle, though few realized the depth of her insight. Determined to observe the village's pulse, Miss Marple donned her tweed coat and set out for her daily constitutional, her basket swinging lightly on her arm. The high street was alive with the soft bustle of St. Mary Mead, the baker sweeping his stoop, the postman whistling a tune, and the villagers exchanging murmurs that carried the weight of fresh tragedy. The air was crisp, scented with wood smoke and damp earth, and the willows along the lane seemed to lean closer, as if eager to share their secrets. At the post office, Miss Weatherby, a sharp-tongued spinster with a nose for scandal, leaned over her counter, her grey curls quivering with excitement. "Miss Marple, it's too shocking. Mrs. Clement, gone like that." She lowered her voice, her eyes gleaming. "I heard she had a row with that Lydia Price, the new heiress at Meadow Cottage. over some inheritance nonsense. Mark my words, there's something queer afoot. Miss Weatherby's personality was a blend of shrewd observation and gleeful malice, her gossip a currency that kept the village's social machinery humming. Miss Marple nodded, her smile benign but her mind cataloguing the detail. Dear me, Miss Weatherby, how curious. Inheritance disputes can stir such passions, can't they? Like that unfortunate business with the rector's cousin. Her gentle tone masked a probing intent, planting a seed of doubt in the postmistress's fertile imagination. As she continued her walk, Miss Marple spotted Lydia Price herself, flitting across the village green in a chic, fur-trimmed coat that seemed out of place among the tweeds and wools of St. Mary Mead. Her dark curls bounced, and her green eyes sparkled with a vivacity that bordered on theatrical. "Oh, Miss Marple," Lydia exclaimed, pausing with a hand to her heart. "Such a tragedy about Mrs. Clement. She was like a grandmother to us all, always so wise." But her smile wavered, and her glance darted toward the vicarage, betraying a flicker of unease beneath her polished charm. Lydia's personality was a glittering facade, her warmth as calculated as her wardrobe, and Miss Marple noted the discrepancy, a potential motive wrapped in crocodile tears. Further along, outside the Blue Boar Inn, Colonel Lucius Prothero puffed on his pipe, his weathered face set in a scowl. A retired military man with a bristling mustache and a temper to match, he was a fixture of the village's old guard. "Balderdash!" he barked when Miss Marple inquired about Mrs. Clement. "The old bat was pushing 80, heart gave out, plain as day. All this fuss is nonsense." His gruff bluster, a shield for a pride easily bruised, hinted at a recent clash with the deceased over parish council funds. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Of course, Colonel, but such sudden losses do stir the mind, don't they? Like that affair at the Memorial Fund meeting." At the vicarage gate, she encountered the vicar, Leonard Clement, a slight man with a scholarly stoop and a face etched with grief. His mild eyes, framed by wire spectacles, met hers with a weary sincerity. "Miss Marple, it's a heavy blow. Mother went peacefully in her sleep. No pain, thank God." But his hands wrung together, a gesture of quiet torment, and his pallor suggested sleepless nights burdened by more than filial sorrow. "She was so strong," he added softly, "always guiding me." His gentle personality, more suited to dusty tomes than village intrigues, carried a vulnerability that tugged at Miss Marple's heart, yet also raised a question. What had Mrs. Clement known that weighed so heavily on her son? As twilight draped the village in a soft lavender glow, Miss Marple returned to her cottage, her mind a whirl of impressions. The whispers of St. Mary Mead were more than idle gossip. They were threads in a tapestry of suspicion. Mrs. Clement's sudden death, cloaked in the convenient guise of heart failure, echoed patterns Miss Marple had seen before, patterns of human weakness, of secrets too dangerous to keep. The postmistress's tale of an inheritance dispute, Lydia's evasive charm, the colonel's defensive bluster, and the vicar's quiet grief all pointed to a deeper truth, one that lurked beneath the village's placid surface. Settling by her fire, Miss Marple resumed her knitting, the click of her needles a steady rhythm as she pondered. "It's the small things, Dolly," she said, as her friend bustled in with cocoa. A glance, a word, a pause. They tell the story. Something is amiss in St. Mary Mead, and I fear it's only the beginning. The chapter closed with the village settling into an uneasy dusk, its lights winking out like stars obscured by clouds, yet offering a moment of quiet reflection on the fragility of peace and the power of observation. Chapter 2. Shadows over the vicarage. The morning mist wove a ghostly veil over St. Mary Mead, cloaking the vicarage in a haze that seemed to whisper of secrets too delicate for sunlight. The thatched roofs glistened with dew, and the air carried the heavy scent of chrysanthemums, their golden blooms lining the path to the vicarage where villagers gathered to mourn old Mrs. Clement. The church bell tolled a single, mournful note, its echo lingering like a question unanswered. Inside, the oak-paneled parlor was a tableau of subdued grief, its polished surfaces reflecting the flicker of candles and the weight of unspoken suspicions. Miss Jane Marple, seated in a corner with her knitting, her fluffy white hair haloed by lamplight, observed the scene with the quiet acuity of a hawk watching a field of mice. Her bright, blue eyes, sharp behind her gentle smile, missed no detail. The averted glances, the whispered asides, the subtle dance of human nature laid bare. The room was a mosaic of St. Mary Mead's denizens, each carrying their own burdens of personality and motive. Lydia Price, the vivacious heiress of Meadow Cottage, stood near a vase of lilies, her fur-trimmed coat a touch too elegant for the occasion. Her dark curls framed a face of calculated charm, but her green eyes darted nervously as she murmured condolences. "Such a shock," she said, her voice a trill of rehearsed sorrow. "Mrs. Clement was so dear to me, like a grandmother really. We had our little spats, but who doesn't?" Her laugh, brittle as frost, betrayed a personality adept at deflection, and Miss Marple noted the tremor in her gloved hand, a psychological clue to a heart less pure than her words suggested. Colonel Lucius Prothero, his broad frame dominating a wing-back chair, puffed on his pipe, the smoke curling like a question mark. "Meddling old woman," he muttered, his mustache bristling with irritation. "Always sticking her nose into parish affairs. Council funds, indeed." His gruff tone, a blend of military bluster and wounded pride, hinted at a recent clash with the deceased over misused donations. Miss Marple's needles clicked steadily, her voice soft as she ventured. "Colonel, such disputes can weigh heavily, can't they? Like that trouble with the War Memorial Fund." Prothero's eyes narrowed, but he waved a dismissive hand. "Nonsense. She was past her prime. Heart gave out, that's all." His defensiveness, a shield for a fragile ego, was a thread in the tapestry Miss Marple was weaving. The vicar, Leonard Clement, moved among the mourners, his slight frame stooped under the weight of grief. His scholarly face, framed by wire spectacles, was pale, his mild eyes red-rimmed. "Thank you for coming, Miss Marple," he said softly, his voice trembling with sincerity. "Mother would have appreciated it. She went so peacefully, no pain, thank God." But his hands wrung together, a gesture of quiet torment, and Miss Marple sensed a deeper burden. Guilt, perhaps, or a secret shared with his formidable mother. "She was a pillar of strength," Miss Marple replied, her tone gentle but probing. "Did she seem troubled of late, Mr. Clement?" The vicar hesitated, his gaze flickering. "She worried about the village always, but nothing specific." His reticence, tender yet evasive, suggested a man protecting more than his mother's memory. Miss Weatherby, the postmistress, hovered near the tea-table, her sharp features alight with the thrill of gossip. She sidled up to Miss Marple, her gray curls quivering as she whispered, "I saw it myself, Miss Marple. Mrs. Clement clutching her chest after tea with Dr. Haydock last week. Those pills he gave her, who knows what was in them?" Her tone was conspiratorial, her personality thriving on the drama of suspicion. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Dear me, Miss Weatherby, how observant you are. Pills can be so unpredictable, can't they? Like that chemist's error in Much Benham." Her mild words planted a seed, and Miss Weatherby's nod was eager, her mind already spinning new theories. Dr. Haydock himself, a bluff man with a kindly twinkle, arrived to offer condolences, his tweed jacket slightly rumpled, his manner hearty but strained. "Poor Mrs. Clement," he said, shaking his head. "Her heart was weak, Gave out suddenly, I'm afraid. Nothing to be done. But Miss Marple noted a fleeting shadow in his eyes, a hint of unease beneath his professional warmth. Dr. Haydock, she said, her voice as soft as her knitting. You saw her often, I presume? Her health was robust until recently, wasn't it? He chuckled, but the sound was forced. Oh, she was spry enough, but age catches us all. His deflection, wrapped in joviality, was a psychological clue Miss Marple filed away. As the wake dispersed, the village exhaled, but the air grew heavier with a fresh shock. By evening, news swept through St. Mary Mead like wildfire. Mr. Hawes, the village chemist, had been found dead in his shop, slumped over the counter, his face frozen in a rictus of pain. Dr. Haydock pronounced it a heart seizure, but the villagers' whispers grew feverish. 2 deaths in as many days, both sudden, both tied to the heart. Miss Marple, sipping cocoa by her fire, her knitting a steady rhythm, pondered the coincidence. Dolly, she said to her friend, who had burst in with the news, this is no mere happenstance. A silent killer moves among us, cloaked in the guise of natural causes. It reminds me of that dreadful business in Upper Quinton. Mrs. Bantry, her eyes wide, plopped onto the sofa. Jane, you can't mean murder? In St. Mary Mead? Her voice was a mix of horror and excitement, her personality ever drawn to the theatrical. Miss Marple's smile was serene, but her mind was a whirl of connections. Human nature, Dolly, is the same everywhere. Greed, fear, resentment, they weave patterns as old as time. We must look closer. The clues were subtle but mounting. Miss Weatherby's tale of Mrs. Clement's distress after tea with Dr. Haydock, Lydia's evasive charm, and her spat with the deceased over an inheritance, Colonel Prothero's defensive bluster about parish funds, the vicar's quiet torment, and Dr. Haydock's strained joviality. The chemist's death added a new thread. His shop, a nexus of medicines, could conceal a poisoner's tools. Miss Marple's grey cells, as sharp as her knitting needles, catalogued the psychological undercurrents. Lydia's ambition, the colonel's pride, the vicar's guilt, the doctor's unease, and the postmistress's relish for scandal. Each was a piece in the puzzle, and the pattern was beginning to emerge. As night fell, the village lights twinkled like wary eyes, the willows whispering secrets to the dark. Miss Marple drew her curtains, the fire casting a warm glow over her parlour. The chapter closed with a sense of gathering shadows, the village's tranquil facade cracked by suspicion, yet tempered by the quiet resolve of its keenest observer. It's the small things, Dolly, Miss Marple murmured, her needles resuming their dance. A look, a pause, a lie. They tell the story, and I shall listen. The peace of St. Mary Mead hung by a thread, but for now it held, offering a moment of reflection on the fragility of trust and the power of a watchful eye. Chapter 3. Threads of suspicion unravel. The morning sun pierced the lingering mist over St. Mary Mead, casting a frail golden glow across the village's cobbled lanes and thatched roofs. The air was sharp with the tang of autumn leaves and a faint, acrid undercurrent from the chemist's shop, where a knot of villagers gathered, their whispers buzzing like bees disturbed from their hive. The sudden death of Mr. Hawes, the chemist, following so closely on the heels of Mrs. Clement's demise, had set tongues wagging and hearts racing. Was it coincidence, or something more sinister lurking in the village's tranquil heart? Miss Jane Marple, her basket of wool swinging lightly on her arm, approached the shop under the guise of collecting a prescription, her sensible shoes tapping a purposeful rhythm on the stones. Her fluffy white hair gleamed in the sunlight, and her bright blue eyes, sharp as a seamstress's needle, scanned the scene for the subtle threads of truth woven into the village's tapestry of gossip. The chemist's shop, a quaint establishment with a green-painted door and bottles of tonics glinting in the window, was now a stage for tragedy. Inside, the air held a faint chemical bite, perhaps from spilled remedies or something more ominous. Inspector Craddock, a young officer from the county police with an earnest brow and a notebook clutched tightly, stood over the counter where Mr. Hawes had been found slumped, his face frozen in a grimace of pain. "Heart seizure, Dr. Haydock says," Craddock announced to the gathered crowd, his voice striving for authority but tinged with doubt. "Nothing suspicious, just a sad coincidence." Miss Marple's lips pursed slightly, her mind recalling a similar case in Lower Quinton where coincidence masked a cunning hand. Dr. Haydock, the village physician, was present, his bluff frame filling the doorway as he adjusted his spectacles. His kindly twinkle was dimmed, his hands fidgeting with his medical bag. "Poor Hawes," he said, shaking his head. "Worked himself to death, mixing potions day and night. His heart couldn't take it." But Miss Marple noted a hurried edge to his words, a subtle evasion in his gaze as he avoided her eyes. "Dr. Haydock," she said, her voice as gentle as her knitting. "You attended both Mrs. Clement and Mr. Hawes. Their symptoms, clutching the chest, sudden collapse, are strikingly similar, are they not?" The doctor chuckled, but the sound was brittle. "Age and stress, Miss Marple. The body fails us all eventually." His deflection, wrapped in professional warmth, was a psychological clue she tucked away. Miss Marple slipped into the tea shop later, where Lydia Price sat sipping chamomile with an air of studied elegance. Her dark curls framed a face of porcelain perfection, but her green eyes flickered with unease as Miss Marple approached. "Lydia, dear," Miss Marple said, settling with her teacup, "you were close to Mr. Hawes, weren't you? Filling those prescriptions for your migraines?" Lydia's smile was a flash of brilliance, but it faltered. "Oh, barely. He was so obliging, though, always chatting about inheritances and such." Her flippancy, sharp as a blade, hinted at a personality adept at steering conversations away from dangerous waters. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Inheritances can stir such passions, can't they? Like that trouble in chipping Cleghorn." Lydia's hand trembled slightly, a psychological thread of ambition or fear woven into her charm. On the village green, Colonel Lucius Prothero stood puffing his pipe, his weathered face set in a scowl as villagers whispered around him. "Hawes owed me money," he growled when Miss Marple inquired gently. "Botched investment, pharmacy nonsense. But death, his own fault for overworking." His bluster, a fortress of pride, cracked under scrutiny, revealing a man stung by financial loss and reluctant to admit vulnerability. "Colonel," Miss Marple ventured, "your disputes with Mrs. Clement, and now Mr. Hawes, money does complicate matters, doesn't it?" Prothero's moustache twitched, but he waved her off. "Nothing to it, Miss Marple. Just village tittle-tattle." His defensiveness was a clue, a motive rooted in wounded pride. At the vicarage, Miss Marple found Leonard Clement in his study, surrounded by dusty theological tomes. His scholarly face was pale, his hands trembling as he adjusted his spectacles. "Miss Marple," he said softly, "this second death, it's too much. First mother, now Hawes. I feel responsible somehow." His gentle voice, laced with self-doubt, painted a man burdened by more than grief. "Mr. Clement," Miss Marple said, her tone kind but probing, "your mother's medicines came from Hawes, prescribed by Dr. Haydock. Did she ever mention concerns about them?" The vicar's eyes widened. She said Hawes was careless once, mixing her pills, but I thought nothing of it." His admission, tender and reluctant, suggested a secret weighing heavily, a motive perhaps tied to filial guilt. Miss Weatherby, the postmistress, intercepted Miss Marple on her way home, her sharp features alight with the thrill of scandal. "I saw it, Miss Marple. Lydia slipping into the chemist's shop late yesterday, just before Hawes was found. Suspicious, if you ask me." Her voice dripped with relish, her personality thriving on the drama of accusation. Miss Marple nodded sagely. "How observant you are, Miss Weatherby. Like that affair with the postmaster's ledger. Small details tell such stories." Her mild words fanned the postmistress's zeal while her mind catalogued the clue: Lydia's presence at the shop, a potential opportunity for mischief. As evening draped St. Mary Mead in a soft lavender veil, Miss Marple settled by her fire, her knitting needles clicking a steady rhythm. The deaths of Mrs. Clement and Mr. Hawes, both attributed to heart failure, bore uncanny similarities: sudden collapse, chest pain, and a faint chemical tang noted by those nearby. The chemist's shop, a nexus of medicines, was a plausible source of poison. Arsenic, perhaps, easily disguised in pills. The psychological threads were weaving together. Lydia's ambition, possibly tied to a disputed inheritance, Colonel Prothero's pride, wounded by financial losses, the vicar's guilt, rooted in his mother's trust, Dr. Haydock's unease, masking professional fears, and Miss Weatherby's gossip, a lens magnifying the village's secrets. "Dolly," Miss Marple said as Mrs. Bantry burst in with a fresh pot of tea, "these deaths are no accident. A pattern emerges, like a poorly darned sock. Pull one thread, and the whole unravels." Mrs. Bantry's eyes widened, her dramatic flair ignited. "Jane, you mean murder, in our little village." Her voice was a mix of horror and thrill, her personality ever drawn to the sensational. Miss Marple's smile was serene, but her mind was a whirl of connections. Human nature, my dear, is the same in a village as in a city. Greed, fear, guilt, they weave a deadly pattern. The clues were mounting. Miss Weatherby's sighting of Lydia at the shop, the Colonel's financial grudge, the vicar's hint of a careless chemist, Dr. Haydock's evasive joviality, and the chemical scent at both death scenes. The village's tranquil facade was cracking, its whispers growing into a chorus of suspicion. Miss Marple's gray cells, as sharp as her needles, pieced together the fragments, sensing a killer who moved silently, cloaked in the trust of St. Mary Mead's daily routines. As the village lights winked out, the willows sighed in the gathering dusk, their whispers a soft counterpoint to the storm brewing within. The chapter closed with a sense of unraveling secrets, the community's resilience tested, but holding firm, offering a moment of reflection on the power of quiet observation in the face of creeping darkness. Miss Marple resumed her knitting, her eyes gleaming with resolve. "It's the small things, Dolly," she murmured. "They always tell the truth." The mystery deepened, but the spinster's steady gaze promised answers in the shadows ahead. Chapter 4. Echoes from the Past. The afternoon breeze swept through St. Mary Mead with a restless chill, rattling the shutters of the vicarage and stirring the ancient willows into a conspiratorial whisper. The village, bathed in the pale gold of an autumn sun, seemed to hold its breath, its cobbled lanes and thatched cottages masking a growing unease. The deaths of Mrs. Clement and Mr. Hawes, both cloaked in the guise of heart failure, had cast a shadow over the community, and the whispers of suspicion now swirled like fallen leaves. Miss Jane Marple, her basket of wool tucked under her arm, made her way to the vicarage's archive room, her sensible shoes tapping a determined rhythm. Her fluffy white hair caught the sunlight, but her bright blue eyes, sharp as ever, sought the echoes of the past that might illuminate the present darkness. The archive, a cramped chamber lined with dusty ledgers and yellowed parish records, smelled of old paper and forgotten scandals. The air was thick with the musty weight of history, and Miss Marple's fingers, nimble from years of knitting, traced the faded ink of entries dating back decades. She was searching for connections, disputed wills, hidden affairs, betrayals, that might explain the sudden deaths plaguing St. Mary Mead. "The past, my dear," she had murmured to Mrs. Bantry that morning, "is never truly buried. It whispers through the present like a poorly darned seam." Her voice, soft and measured, carried the weight of experience, her mind weaving patterns as intricate as her lacework. Her first stop was Colonel Lucius Prothero's manor, where she found him in his study, surrounded by hunting trophies and the acrid scent of pipe smoke. His weathered face, framed by a bristling moustache, was set in a scowl as he polished a silver-framed photograph of his regiment. "Colonel," Miss Marple said, settling into a leather chair with her knitting, "your quarrel with Mrs. Clement over the war memorial funds, wasn't it? And Mr. Hawes, too, had a role in that affair?" Prothero's eyes narrowed, his bluster rising like a storm. "Damned interference. The old bat thought she could dictate how I spent parish money. And Hawes bungled an investment I made in his shop." His voice, a bark of military authority, cracked with bitterness, revealing a man whose pride was a fragile shield. Miss Marple's needles clicked softly. "Money does complicate matters, doesn't it? Like that business with the church roof fund." Her gentle probe elicited a flush, a psychological clue to a grudge that ran deeper than he admitted. Next, Miss Marple visited Lydia Price in her rose garden at Meadow Cottage, where the heiress was pruning blooms with a theatrical flourish. Her dark curls bounced, and her green eyes sparkled with calculated charm. But her smile tightened as Miss Marple approached. "Lydia, dear," Miss Marple said, her voice as warm as her tea. "Mrs. Clement was quite vocal about your inheritance, wasn't she? Thought you were after the vicar's affections, perhaps." Lydia's laugh was sharp, like thorns beneath her roses. "How quaint. She was mistaken, of course. Silly old notions about romance. I only wanted to settle in quietly." Her vivacity, polished yet evasive, hinted at a personality adept at manipulation, her motives tangled in ambition and secrecy. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. Misunderstandings can stir such passions, can't they? Like that affair with the squire's daughter. Lydia's pruning shears paused, a flicker of unease crossing her face, a thread of guilt, perhaps. At the vicarage, Miss Marple found Leonard Clement in his study, his scholarly frame hunched over a pile of sermons. His mild eyes, behind wire spectacles, were shadowed with grief and something deeper, guilt or fear. "Mr. Clement," she said gently, "your mother discovered something about Mr. Hawes, didn't she? A secret from his past, perhaps." The vicar's hands trembled, his voice soft with reluctance. "Mother, she mentioned a forgery. Hawes had altered a prescription years ago, a mistake that cost a patient dearly. She confronted him, urged him to confess. His admission, tender and burdened, painted a man haunted by his mother's righteousness and his own inaction." Miss Marple nodded, her needles clicking. "Secrets weigh heavily, don't they? Like that curate's confession in Lower Quinton." Her words, mild as ever, drew a wince from the vicar, a psychological clue to a motive rooted in filial shame. Dr. Haydock, visited at his surgery, was bustling with patients but paused to greet Miss Marple with his usual hearty chuckle. "Echoes from the past? Nonsense, Miss Marple. Natural causes, both deaths, heart troubles, nothing more." But his twinkle faltered, his hands fidgeting with a stethoscope, and the air held a faint chemical tang, like that in the chemist's shop. "Dr. Haydock," Miss Marple said, "you prescribed Mrs. Clement's pills, filled by Hawes. Any chance of an error?" His laugh was forced, his joviality a mask for professional anxiety. "No errors here, Miss Marple, just age and strain." His deflection, wrapped in warmth, was a clue to a man guarding his reputation fiercely. Miss Weatherby, encountered at the post office, added spice to the day's findings. "I recall it now, Miss Marple," she whispered, her gray curls quivering with excitement. "Hawes and the Colonel arguing, money troubles, something about a bad loan, and Mrs. Clement poking her nose in, as always." Her tone, dripping with relish, revealed a personality that thrived on scandal, yet her observations were gold to Miss Marple's keen mind. "How observant, Miss Weatherby," she replied. "Like that postmaster's ledger affair. Small details tell such tales." Her encouragement fueled the postmistress's zeal, while her mind catalogued the clue, financial entanglements linking the victims. As dusk settled over St. Mary Mead, Miss Marple sat by her fire, her knitting a steady rhythm as she pieced together the day's revelations. The archives had yielded a treasure, a record of a disputed will tied to Lydia Price's inheritance, contested by Mrs. Clement, who suspected fraud. Hawes's past forgery, uncovered by the vicar's mother, had threatened his livelihood, a motive for silencing her. The Colonel's financial loss, tied to Hawes's failed venture, fueled his bitterness, while Dr. Haydock's prescriptions linked both deaths, his unease suggesting a hidden error. The chemical scent, the sudden collapses, arsenic perhaps disguised in pills, was a chilling possibility. The psychological threads wove a vivid pattern. Lydia's ambition, the Colonel's pride, the vicar's guilt, the doctor's fear, and Miss Weatherby's gossip, each a strand in the tapestry of deceit. "Dolly," Miss Marple said as Mrs. Bantry burst in with a tray of biscuits, "the past is speaking, and it tells of secrets too dangerous to keep. These deaths are linked, like stitches in a poorly made scarf. Pull one, and all unravels." Mrs. Bantry's eyes widened, her dramatic flair ignited. "Jane, you mean someone's poisoning our village? It's too ghastly." Her voice was a mix of horror and thrill, her personality ever drawn to the sensational. Miss Marple's smile was serene, but her mind was a whirl of connections. "Human nature, my dear, leaves footprints, even in a village as small as ours." The chapter closed with the village settling into an uneasy dusk, its lights twinkling like wary eyes against the gathering dark. The willows sighed, their whispers echoing the scandals of yesteryear, while Miss Marple's grey cells worked tirelessly, unraveling the threads of suspicion. The community's charm, though tested, held firm, offering a moment of reflection on the enduring power of quiet observation in the face of creeping malice. "It's the small things, Dolly," Miss Marple murmured, her needles dancing. "They always lead to the truth." The mystery deepened, but the spinster's resolve promised clarity in the shadows ahead. Chapter 5. The gathering storm. Dark clouds massed over St. Mary Mead, their heavy bellies promising a deluge as the village huddled beneath a sky bruised with foreboding. The cobbled lanes glistened with early rain, and the ancient willows swayed, their whispers drowned by the rising wind. The deaths of Mrs. Clement and Mr. Hawes, cloaked in the guise of heart failure, had cracked the village's tranquil facade, and suspicion now hung like damp mist, seeping into every cottage and heart. Miss Jane Marple, her fluffy white hair aglow in the lamplight of her rose-scented parlour, hosted an impromptu gathering of the village's key figures, her knitting needles clicking a steady rhythm against the storm's crescendo. Her bright blue eyes, sharp behind her gentle smile, scanned the assembly, seeking the subtle tells of guilt amid the flickering shadows. The parlour, warm with the glow of a crackling fire, was a haven of coziness, yet the air crackled with tension. The windows rattled under the rain's assault, and the shadows cast by the lamplight danced like conspirators on the chintz curtains. Miss Marple had invited the suspects under the pretext of discussing village affairs, but her true purpose was to tighten the net of suspicion. "My dear friends," she began, her voice soft as a lullaby but carrying the weight of quiet authority. "These tragedies, Mrs. Clement, Mr. Hawes, have shaken our little community. We must share what we know, for truth is often found in the smallest threads." Leonard Clement, the vicar, sat by the hearth, his scholarly frame hunched, his mild eyes shadowed with grief. His wire spectacles glinted as he wrung his hands, his voice trembling with vulnerability. "Miss Marple, it's too dreadful. First mother, now Hawes. Could her medicines have been tampered with?" His question, soft with horror, revealed a man grappling with the sting of betrayal, his gentle personality ill-equipped for such dark possibilities. Miss Marple's needles paused, her tone kind but probing. "Dear Mr. Clement, your mother's pills, supplied by Hawes, prescribed by Dr. Haydock, formed a chain of trust. Could it have been broken?" The vicar's pallor deepened, a psychological clue to his torment. "I should have checked them," he murmured. "She trusted me." Lydia Price, poised elegantly on a floral sofa, sipped tea with a theatrical flourish, her dark curls framing a face of porcelain perfection. Her green eyes sparkled, but a flicker of unease betrayed her polished charm. "How thrillingly grim," she trilled, her voice light but strained. "But surely it's all coincidence. I only sought relief from my migraines from Hawes." Her deflection, artful as a dance, hinted at a personality adept at weaving lies, her motives tangled in ambition or fear. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Migraines can be so trying, Lydia, like that heiress in Chipping Cleghorn, whose ailments hid deeper designs." Lydia's teacup trembled slightly, a thread of guilt woven into her vivacity. Colonel Lucius Prothero, his broad frame filling an armchair, pounded the table with a fist, his mustache bristling with indignation. "Outrageous nonsense," he roared, his pipe smoke curling like a storm cloud. "If anyone's to blame, it's that quack Haydock. Botched my gout treatment years ago. Probably bungled their medicines too." His bluster, fierce yet faltering, exposed a man whose pride masked a fear of vulnerability, his financial disputes with Hawes a lingering wound. Miss Marple's voice was gentle. "Colonel, errors in medicine can stir such passions, can't they? Like that affair with the parish funds." Prothero's face reddened, his defensiveness a psychological clue to a grudge that burned hot. Dr. Haydock, arriving late with a gust of rain-soaked air, settled near the fire, his bluff manner strained. His tweed jacket was damp, his kindly twinkle dimmed by a nervous fidgeting with his spectacles. "Miss Marple, your imagination runs wild," he chuckled, but the sound was hollow. "Heart troubles, both cases, sad but natural." His joviality, a mask for professional anxiety, faltered under her scrutiny. "Dr. Haydock," she said, "your prescriptions linked both victims. Any chance of an oversight?" His laugh was forced, his hands tightening on his medical bag. "No oversights here, Miss Marple. Just the frailty of age." His deflection, wrapped in warmth, was a clue to a man guarding a secret. Miss Weatherby, the postmistress, perched eagerly on a stool, her gray curls quivering with excitement. "I saw it, Miss Marple," she exclaimed, her sharp features alight with relish. "Lydia with a vial at the chemist's shop. Suspicious, if you ask me." Her accusation, delivered with dramatic flair, ignited the room's tension, her personality thriving on the thrill of scandal. Miss Marple nodded sagely. "How observant, Miss Weatherby, like that postmaster's tale. Small details weave the truth." Her encouragement fueled the postmistress's zeal, while her mind catalogued the clue, Lydia's presence at the shop. a potential opportunity for poison. As thunder rumbled, shaking the parlor's windows, Miss Marple's grey cells wove the day's threads into a vivid pattern. The similarities in the deaths, sudden collapse, chest pain, a chemical tang, pointed to arsenic, a poison easily concealed in pills. Lydia's ambition, tied to a disputed inheritance, made her a suspect. Her late-night visit to the chemist's shop a damning clue. Colonel Prothero's financial grudge against Hawes and his clash with Mrs. Clement over funds suggested a motive rooted in pride. The vicar's guilt, stemming from his mother's trust in faulty medicines, hinted at negligence or worse. Dr. Haydock's unease, masking professional fears, pointed to a possible error or deliberate act. Miss Weatherby's gossip, though theatrical, was a lens magnifying the village's secrets. "Dolly," Miss Marple said as Mrs. Bantry bustled in with a fresh pot of tea, "the storm outside mirrors the one within. These deaths are linked by a poisoner's hand, and the clues are tightening like a well-knitted scarf." Mrs. Bantry's eyes widened, her dramatic flair ignited. "Jane, you mean someone's killing our neighbors? It's too shocking." Her voice was a mix of horror and thrill, her personality ever drawn to the sensational. Miss Marple's smile was serene, but her mind was a whirl of connections. Human nature, my dear, leaves footprints, even in the quietest villages. The gathering dispersed as the storm intensified, lightning illuminating the suspects' faces. Lydia's forced smile, the colonel's scowl, the vicar's pallor, Dr. Haydock's fidgeting, Miss Weatherby's eager gleam. The clues were coalescing. The chemical scent, Lydia's vial, the colonel's grudge, the vicar's guilt, the doctor's prescriptions. The timeline was critical. Mrs. Clement's death after tea with Haydock, Hawes' collapse after Lydia's visit. Arsenic, Miss Marple mused, was a silent killer, its symptoms masked as heart failure, its source likely the chemist's shop. As the village settled into a rain-soaked night, the parlor's warmth offered a fleeting comfort, its firelight a beacon against the gathering storm. The chapter closed with a sense of impending clarity, the community's resilience tested, but holding firm, a testament to the power of quiet observation. Miss Marple resumed her knitting, her needles a steady rhythm against the rain's tattoo. "It's the small things, Dolly," she murmured, her eyes gleaming with resolve. "They always lead to the truth." The mystery was tightening, and the spinster's watchful gaze promised answers in the tempest ahead. Chapter 6. The Unmasked Truth. The storm broke over St. Mary Mead with ferocious intensity, lightning slashing the night sky like an accusing finger, illuminating the vicarage where Miss Jane Marple had summoned the village's key figures for a final reckoning. Rain lashed the mullioned windows, their panes rattling as if demanding the truth be spoken. The parlor, aglow with the flickering light of a roaring fire, was a crucible of tension, its chintz curtains and polished oak heavy with the scent of wet earth and unspoken guilt. Miss Marple stood at the room's center, her diminutive frame a beacon of quiet authority, her fluffy white hair haloed by lamplight. Her bright blue eyes, sharp as her knitting needles, swept over the assembled suspects, each a thread in the tapestry of deceit she was about to unravel. The air crackled with anticipation, the village's tranquil facade shattered by the weight of 2 murders. The suspects, arrayed like players in a tragic drama, watched her with a mix of dread and fascination. Leonard Clement, the vicar, sat by the hearth, his scholarly face pale, his hands wringing in torment. Lydia Price, poised on a floral sofa, clutched her teacup with forced elegance, her green eyes darting nervously. Colonel Lucius Prothero, his broad frame rigid in an armchair, puffed his pipe with a scowl, his moustache bristling. Dr. Haydock, near the fire, fidgeted with his spectacles, his bluff joviality strained. Miss Weatherby, the postmistress, perched eagerly on a stool, her grey curls quivering with excitement. Mrs. Bantry, hovering near the tea tray, cast wide-eyed glances at Miss Marple, her dramatic flair barely contained. The storm outside roared, a mirror to the tempest within. "My dear friends," Miss Marple began, her voice soft as a lullaby, but carrying the weight of unyielding truth. "St. Mary Mead has been touched by a silent killer, one who moves among us, cloaked in the guise of heart failure. Mrs. Clement and Mr. Hawes were poisoned with arsenic, administered in their medicines. A subtle, merciless act. The clues, they are small but clear, and tonight they lead us to the truth." She paced slowly, her knitting needles silent in her basket, her eyes piercing each suspect in turn. The chemical scent at both death scenes, the sudden collapses, the pills linking victim to chemist to doctor. These are no coincidence. The motives, they weave a pattern. Ambition, pride, guilt, fear. Let us unravel it together. Lydia Price gasped, her teacup clattering. "Miss Marple, surely you don't suspect me. I adored Mrs. Clement. She was like family." Her voice, a trill of rehearsed sorrow, cracked under scrutiny, her vivacity a mask for calculation. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Dear Lydia, your migraines were a convenient excuse, were they not? Mrs. Clement suspected your inheritance was forged, a threat to your wealth. You were seen at the chemist's shop late, a vial in hand." Lydia's face paled, her charm faltering, but Miss Marple raised a hand. Yet the vial, it was too obvious, a plant perhaps to mislead. Colonel Prothero pounded the table, his pipe smoke curling like a storm cloud. "Preposterous nonsense. I had my quarrels with Clement and Hawes, funds, investments, but murder. Absurd." His bluster, fierce yet fragile, betrayed a man whose pride was wounded by financial loss. Miss Marple's voice was gentle. "Colonel, your grudge was real, but your temper, it is loud, not subtle. Arsenic requires a quieter hand." Prothero's scowl deepened, but he fell silent, a psychological clue to his bluster-masking vulnerability. The vicar, Leonard, whispered, "No, it can't be." His mild eyes behind wire spectacles were wide with horror. "Mother trusted those pills. I failed her." His voice, tender with guilt, painted a man burdened by inaction. Miss Marple's tone was kind. "Mr. Clement, your guilt is heavy, but it is not the hand of murder. Your mother's discovery of Hawes's forgery was a spark, but not your own." Miss Weatherby leaned forward, her sharp features alight. "I knew it was suspicious. Lydia at the shop, Haydock's pills, someone's guilty." Her relish for scandal, delivered with dramatic zest, was a lens magnifying the village's secrets. Miss Marple nodded. "Your observations, Miss Weatherby, are invaluable, but they point to many, not one." Her gaze settled on Dr. Haydock, whose spectacles glinted nervously in the firelight. "Dr. Haydock, your prescriptions linked both victims. Mrs. Clement's pills, Hawes's supply, both tainted with arsenic. Your joviality, it masks a fear, does it not?" The doctor's chuckle was hollow, his hands tightening on his medical bag. "Miss Marple, you're mistaken. I'm a healer, not a killer. Heart troubles, nothing more." But his eyes darted, a psychological thread of anxiety unraveling. Miss Marple's voice softened, but her words were a scalpel. "The pattern is clear. Mrs. Clement uncovered a secret, a botched treatment years ago, a patient lost under your care, Dr. Haydock. She urged Hawes to confess his part in forging the prescription that hid your error. You silenced her with arsenic, disguised in her pills. When Hawes grew suspicious, you poisoned him too, using his own stock. The chemical scent, the sudden collapses, they betray your hand. Haydock's facade crumbled, his face ashen. She would have ruined me, he gasped, his voice raw with desperation. Years of service, my reputation, gone. Hawes was weak, ready to confess. I had no choice. His confession, a torrent of regret, echoed in the silent room, the thunder outside a final punctuation. Miss Marple sighed, her eyes gentle but resolute. Human nature, Dr. Haydock, is predictable in its frailty. But murder, it is never the only path. She turned to Inspector Craddock, who stood agape in the doorway. Inspector, you have your murderer. Take him. As Haydock was led away, his shoulders slumped, the room exhaled, the tension breaking like the storm outside. Lydia's teacup steadied, her relief palpable but tinged with shame. The colonel's pipe went out, his bluster softened by humility. The vicar's eyes filled with tears, his guilt eased by truth. Miss Weatherby's curls stilled, her gossip silenced by justice. Mrs. Bantry, clutching her pearls, whispered, "Jane, you're a marvel." Her dramatic flair, now subdued, reflected the village's collective sigh. As dawn broke, the storm faded, sunlight piercing the clouds to bathe St. Mary Mead in a golden glow. The willows stood silent, their whispers stilled, and the village's lights twinkled with renewed hope. Miss Marple resumed her knitting, her needles a steady rhythm against the morning's quiet. "It's the small things, Dolly," she murmured, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "They always tell the truth." The chapter closed with the community's resilience restored, justice served, and lives mended in the quiet ways of a village that endured. The mystery was solved, the killer unmasked, leaving no threads dangling, only peace reclaimed. Thank you, dear listener, for joining this gentle journey tonight. May the story's quiet mystery and comforting atmosphere stay with you as you drift deeper into peaceful rest. Remember, there will always be another tale waiting for you here, ready to soothe, to comfort, and to carry you into sweet dreams. Until next time, sleep well, rest deeply, and good night.